Jacob's voice cut through the settling dust as he dismounted, his boots hitting the hardpan with a hollow thud. The girl couldn't be more than 22, 23 at most, with the kind of pale skin that spoke of libraries and lecture halls rather than sun and saddle leather. Her dress, a deep blue calico that had seen better days, marked her as gentry fallen on hard times. "You lost, miss." He kept his distance, hat tilted low. 3 years of raising his boy Mateo alone had taught him to read trouble in a person's stance, and this girl wore worry like a second skin. She turned then, and Jacob felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray-green and restless, and when they met his, she sucked in a breath sharp enough to cut glass. "You're him," she whispered, and the words fell between them like stones in still water. "You're the man. From my dreams." The sun blazed overhead, but Jacob felt a chill crawl up his spine. He'd heard plenty of strange talk in his 31 years. Prospectors who claimed they could smell gold. Old-timers who swore they could predict weather by the way crows gathered. But this girl spoke with the certainty of someone who'd seen the future written in tea leaves. "Ma'am, I think you've got me confused with someone else." He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture that had become second nature. "The name's Jacob Everett. I run cattle on the Lazy E, about 15 miles south of here." She shook her head, never breaking eye contact. "You have a scar." Her voice carried the educated cadence of the East, each word precise as a surgeon's cut. "Right here." She touched her own temple, mirroring a mark he'd carried since childhood. "And your eyes, they're brown like coffee grounds, but they turn gold when you're angry." Jacob's hand instinctively moved to his scar, a thin white line, where his father's temperament had met his 7-year-old defiance. No stranger could know that. Hell, most folks who'd known him his whole life never noticed it beneath the shadow of his hat. "How do you?" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. The girl was sun-touched, had to be. The heat did things to people, made them see mirages and speak nonsense. But those eyes held secrets. "My name is Naomi Baxter," she said, setting down her carpetbag with deliberate care. "I've been traveling for 3 days from Denver, and I know this sounds like the ravings of a madwoman, but I've been dreaming about you for 6 months." The admission hung between them like smoke from a dying fire. Jacob studied her face, the determined set of her jaw, the way her fingers twisted the fabric of her skirt. Either she was the finest actress he'd ever encountered, or she believed every word she spoke. "Dreams," he repeated, tasting the word like bitter medicine. "About me. About this place. About a man with kind eyes and calloused hands who was raising a boy alone." She gestured toward the vast expanse of prairie grass and scattered cottonwoods. "I saw you standing in a field of sunflowers, and you were crying. Not from sadness, but from joy. And there was a woman beside you. Not your wife, someone new. Someone who understood your silence." Jacob's blood ran cold. He'd planted sunflowers behind the house last spring, Mateo's idea, thinking they might brighten the place up. But he'd never cried in that field. Never stood there with anyone but his son. "You're talking foolishness," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Dreams don't mean nothing but what you ate for supper." Naomi stepped closer, and he caught the scent of lavender and something else, something that reminded him of rain on summer dust. "In my dreams, you told me your wife died in childbirth. That you blame yourself for wanting the baby so badly. That you still set a plate for her at Sunday dinner." The words hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, his hand finding the grip of his Colt out of pure instinct. Only 3 people knew about the plate: himself, Mateo, and the preacher who tried to talk him out of what he called unhealthy grieving. "Who sent you?" His voice turned sharp as broken glass. "Who's been talking?" "No one sent me." She raised her hands, palms out, but didn't retreat. "I'm a student at the Colorado Seminary for Women. I was supposed to board the eastbound train this morning, go home to my father's house in Boston. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw your face. Saw this road. Saw you finding me here." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through buffalo grass. Jacob felt the weight of decision pressing down on him like a stone. Every instinct he'd developed as a rancher, as a father, as a man who'd learned to trust his gut, screamed at him to mount up and ride away. But those eyes. Those storm cloud eyes that seemed to hold tomorrow's secrets. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, he said finally, but I've got a ranch to run and a boy to raise. I don't have time for— The boy's name is Mateo, she interrupted softly. He's 8 years old, and he builds elaborate castles out of mud and sticks. He asks questions about his mother that you don't know how to answer. And he's been having nightmares about wolves. Jacob's world tilted sideways. Mateo had woken up screaming 3 times this week, babbling about gray shapes circling the house. But they'd told no one. The boy was ashamed of his fears, and Jacob had promised to keep them secret. How? The word came out as a croak. How do you know these things? Naomi's expression softened, and for the first time, she looked vulnerable. Uncertain. I don't know. I only know that I've been dreaming about you and your son for months, and every dream feels more real than my waking life. I've seen danger coming to your ranch, men with guns and grievances. I've seen your boy in terrible peril. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. And I've seen myself standing beside you when the dust settles. The sun had begun its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Jacob felt the familiar pull of evening chores, the responsibility of home. But something in Naomi's voice, in the way she spoke of his son, made him hesitate. Even if what you're saying is true, he said slowly, even if you've somehow seen things that haven't happened yet, why would you leave everything behind? Why would you risk? Because in every dream, I'm happy, she said simply. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I belong. The words hung in the air between them like a promise or a threat. Jacob felt the familiar ache in his chest, the loneliness that had become his constant companion since Sarah's death. But beneath it, something else stirred, a flutter of possibility he'd thought died with his wife, somewhere in the distance. A wolf howled. But as the primitive sound echoed across the plains, Jacob noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh horse tracks in the dust, circling the spot where they stood, as if someone had been watching them from the shadows. Jacob stared at the deed until the words blurred together like ink in rainwater. His signature looked authentic, every loop and flourish exactly as he'd written it 1,000 times before. But the date made his blood run cold. November 15th, 1887. 3 months from now. And the witness signature belonged to someone called N. Everett. This is impossible, he whispered, but his hands shook as he held the paper. Where did you get this? Naomi's face had gone pale as winter moonlight. I found it in my dormitory room this morning. It was just there, on my pillow when I woke up, like someone had placed it there while I slept. Quinn edged closer, his young face creased with confusion. What's it say, Mr. Everett? Jacob's voice came out as a croak. According to this, I sign over the Lazy Ranch to someone named Marcus Thornfield on November 15th. 3 months from now. He looked up at Naomi, searching her face for answers. Who's N. Everett? The witness. I don't know, but something in her eyes suggested she suspected. Jacob, there's more. Things I've been afraid to tell you because they sound like the ravings of a mad woman. The prairie wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and something else, something. That made Jacob's horse stamp nervously. Storm coming, maybe. Or worse. Tell me, he said simply. All of it. Naomi closed her eyes, as if gathering strength from some inner well. The dream started 6 months ago, right after my 20th birthday. At first, they were just fragments. Images of a man with sad eyes, a boy building castles in the mud, a ranch house with yellow curtains in the kitchen window. Jacob's breath caught. Sarah had sewn those curtains the week before she died, bright as summer sunshine. He'd never had the heart to take them down. But then the dreams became more detailed, more real. I saw you reading to Mateo from a book about knights and dragons. I saw you standing in the barn, crying over a bridle that had belonged to your wife. I saw you planting sunflowers because you thought they might make the boy smile. Each detail hit him like a physical blow. The book was hidden in his bedroom, Mateo's favorite, though he'd never admit it to the other ranch hands. The bridle hung on a nail in the tack room, and used since Sarah's death. The sunflowers, how? The word came out strangled. How is any of this possible? I don't know. Naomi opened her eyes, and he saw tears there. But I know what I've seen. And I know that if we don't act, if we don't change what's supposed to happen, you and Mateo will lose everything. Quinn cleared his throat nervously. Ma'am, not to interrupt, but what's supposed to happen? In your dreams, I mean. Naomi's face hardened. Marcus Thornfield arrives in 2 weeks with a gang of hired guns. They don't just want the ranch. They want Jacob dead. They manufacture a reason to call him out. Make it look like a fair fight. But it's not fair. It's murder. And Mateo. Jacob's voice was barely a whisper. Sent to an orphanage in Denver. The ranch becomes part of a larger water rights scheme, along with a dozen other properties in the territory. Naomi's hands clenched into fists. But that's not the worst part. Jacob Everett had sworn off picking up strangers the day his wife died. But something about the girl standing in the dust cloud of his retreating cattle made him pull the reins hard enough to leave marks on his palms. The August heat shimmered off the Colorado plains like a fever dream, and Jacob squinted through the haze at the figure ahead. She stood perfectly still in the middle of the dirt road, a carpet bag clutched against her chest, her dark hair whipping in the wind like a battle flag. Most folks would have stepped aside when they heard 200 head of longhorns thundering their way. This one held her ground. Whoa there, Buckeye. Jacob felt his world shifting beneath him like quicksand. What's the worst part? The woman who's supposed to help you fight them. The one in the deed signature. She arrives too late. She falls in love with you, Jacob, but she can't save you. She can only watch you die and spend the rest of her life knowing she failed. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate, a sound full of longing and loss. Jacob looked at the deed again, at that mysterious signature. N. Everett. N. Everett, he said slowly. Naomi Everett. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. In the dreams, we're married. You put a ring on my finger 3 days before Marcus Thornfield kills you. And I spend the rest of my life knowing that I had the power to change things, but I arrived too late to matter. The revelation hit Jacob like a flash flood, washing away everything he thought he knew about his life, his future, his carefully built walls. This woman, this stranger who knew his secrets and his son's fears, was meant to be his wife. In some other timeline, some other reality, they'd found each other and built something beautiful. But you didn't arrive too late, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You're here now? 3 months early. Yes. Naomi stepped closer, and he caught that scent again, lavender and rain-washed earth. I think someone or something gave me a chance to change things. To save you. To save us. Quinn looked between them like a man watching a lightning storm. This is almighty strange, but if what you're saying is true, then we need to prepare. We need to get ready for this Thornfield fellow. Jacob nodded, his mind already racing ahead to defenses and strategies. But underneath the practical planning, something else stirred, a warmth he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. We'll need men, he said. Good men who can shoot straight and aren't afraid of a fight. I might know some folks, Quinn offered. Cowboys who've been blacklisted by the big ranchers for standing up to bullies like Elias. They might be willing to help if the pay's fair. And weapons, Jacob continued. Ammunition. Supplies. He looked at Naomi, this woman who'd walked out of his dreams and into his life. You said you've seen how this ends. In your dreams, what did we do wrong? Naomi closed her eyes again, and, when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of witnessed tragedy. You tried to face them alone. You sent Mateo away to keep him safe, but that just made you reckless. You forgot that you had something worth living for. And this time, you'll remember. She opened her eyes, and he saw steel there alongside the storm clouds. This time, you'll have help. And this time, you'll have a reason to survive. The dead outlaw's horse nickered softly, breaking the spell that had settled over them. Jacob realized they'd been standing in the middle of the road for nearly an hour, exposed and vulnerable. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. We need to get back to the ranch, he said. Get you settled and start making plans. Mr. Everett, Quinn said hesitantly. What about him? He gestured toward the dead man. Jacob looked at the corpse, at the flies already beginning to gather. We'll send word to the sheriff in the morning. Right now, we have bigger concerns. They mounted up, Naomi riding double behind Jacob, her arms wrapped around his waist in a way that felt both foreign and familiar. Quinn tied the dead man's horse to his saddle and followed at a respectful distance as they rode toward the ranch. Jacob felt Naomi's breath warm against his neck. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something I haven't told you about Mateo." His blood chilled. "What about him?" "In my dreams, he's not just afraid of wolves. He's afraid of them for a reason." Her grip tightened. "Jacob, your son, has the same gift I do. He's been seeing things, hasn't he? Things that haven't happened yet." The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Mateo's nightmares about wolves. His uncanny ability to predict when storms were coming. The way he sometimes spoke about people before they arrived, as if he'd met them in dreams. "My God," Jacob whispered. "That's why you found us. That's why you knew. He's been calling to me," Naomi finished. "In dreams, across impossible distances. Your son brought me here, Jacob. He's been trying to save his father's life." The ranch house came into view as they crested the final hill, its windows glowing warm and yellow in the gathering dusk. But something was wrong. The front door stood open, and Jacob could see no sign of movement inside. "Mateo." Jacob spurred his horse forward, fear clutching at his chest like iron fingers. But as they raced toward the house, Naomi's scream cut through the evening air. "Jacob, stop. It's a trap. I can see them in the shadows, waiting." Jacob's horse reared as he hauled back on the reins, its hooves pawing the air like desperate prayers. Naomi's warning echoed in his ears as his eyes swept the ranch yard, searching for movement in the lengthening shadows. The evening light played tricks with his vision, turning every fence post into a crouching gunman, every wind-blown curtain into a signal of danger. "Where?" he whispered, his Colt already in his hand. "The barn." Naomi breathed against his ear. "Two men, and one behind. The water trough." Her voice turned urgent. "Jacob, Mateo's not in the house. He's in the root cellar, but he's not alone." The root cellar. Jacob's blood turned to ice water. The boy must have sensed danger coming and hidden himself in the one place Jacob had taught him to go if trouble ever found the ranch. But if someone was down there with him, how many? Jacob's voice was steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "6 total," Naomi replied, her eyes closed as if she were seeing through some inner sight. "But Jacob, one of them is just a boy, younger than Quinn. He's scared, and he doesn't want to be here." Quinn had drawn his gun, his face pale but determined. "What's the plan, Mr. Everett?" Jacob studied the layout of his own ranch with new eyes, seeing it as a battlefield rather than a home. The barn offered good cover but limited escape routes. The house was too exposed. "But the root cellar, they're using my boy as bait," he said, his voice turning hard as winter steel. "They want me to come charging in, desperate and stupid." "So, what do we do?" Quinn asked. "We don't give them what they want." Jacob dismounted, helping Naomi down with gentle hands that belied the fury building inside him. "We're going to circle around through the creek bed. Come at them from the side, they're not watching." But as they prepared to move, a voice rang out from the barn, rough and commanding, with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "Jacob Everett, I know you're out there." Jacob recognized the voice immediately. Marcus Thornfield, the man who wasn't supposed to arrive for 2 more weeks. Somehow, someway, their timeline had shifted. "I've got something that belongs to you," Thornfield continued. "A boy with your eyes and your stubborn streak. He's been telling me the most interesting stories about dreams and visions. Seems he takes after his old man's taste for strange women." The insult to Sarah's memory hit Jacob like a physical blow, but Naomi's hand on his arm kept him steady. She was right. They wanted him angry and reckless. "What do you want, Thornfield?" Jacob called back, his voice carrying across the yard. "Same thing I've always wanted. Your land, your water, your cooperation." A pause. "Sign the deed over to me, and the boy lives. Fight me, and he dies slow. And if I sign..." Thornfield's laugh was like breaking glass. "Then you die quick. Call it a mercy." Jacob felt Naomi tense. Beside him. "That's not how it's supposed to happen," she whispered. "In my dreams, he challenges you to a duel. Makes it look legitimate." "Plans change," Jacob said grimly. "Question is, can you still see what's going to happen?" Naomi closed her eyes, her face creasing with concentration. "It's different. Fuzzy. Like looking through dirty glass. But I can see Mateo. He's not just scared, he's angry. And he's planning something." Before Jacob could ask what, A new voice cut through the evening air, young, clear, and filled with defiance. Papa, don't listen to them. They're afraid of you. Mateo, his brave, foolish boy. Jacob's heart swelled with pride and terror in equal measure. Shut up, brat. Another voice, harsher than Thornfield's. The sound of a slap echoed across the yard, followed by a man's cry of pain. He bit me. Little bastard bit me. Jacob was moving before he realized it. Rage overwhelming caution. But Quinn and Naomi were there, grabbing his arms, holding him back. That's what they want, Naomi said urgently. Jacob, listen to me. Mateo's not just stalling, he's telling you something. He said they're afraid of you. Why would they be afraid? Jacob forced himself to think through the red haze of fury. Thornfield had come early, brought more men than necessary, and was hiding in the barn instead of challenging him openly. None of it made sense unless they know, he said slowly. They know about you, about your dreams. But how? Elias, Quinn said suddenly. He rode straight here after you shot him. Must have warned them. The implications hit Jacob like a thunderbolt. If Thornfield knew about Naomi's visions, knew that she'd seen his plans, then everything had changed. The future was no longer fixed. The battle lines had shifted. Enough talking. Thornfield's voice cracked like a whip. You have 1 minute to decide, Everett. Sign the deed, or I start cutting pieces off your boy. Jacob's vision went red around the edges. 1 minute. Not enough time to circle around. Not enough time for a careful plan. But maybe enough time for something desperate. Naomi, he said quietly, can you still see what happens if we fight? Fragments, she whispered. Fire. Lots of fire. And her eyes snapped open, wide with realization. The sunflowers. Jacob, the sunflowers are the key. The sunflower field. Behind the house. Jacob had planted them in neat rows, thinking they might brighten the place up for Mateo. But sunflowers grew tall and thick, and they were dry as tinder after the long summer. If someone were to set them ablaze. Quinn, Jacob said, his mind racing. How are you with a torch? The young man's eyes lit up with understanding. Pretty good, I reckon. Time's up, Everett. Thornfield's voice boomed across the yard. Last chance. Jacob cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted back. I'm coming in. Don't hurt the boy. But instead of walking toward the barn, he grabbed Naomi's hand and began moving toward the house. Can you ride? He asked. Well enough, she replied, though her voice shook. Good. In about 2 minutes, this whole place is going to be chaos. I need you to get to the root cellar and get Mateo out. Can you do that? What about you? Jacob's smile was sharp as a blade. I'm going to give Mr. Thornfield something to think about. They reached the house just as Quinn disappeared around the back, heading for the sunflower field with a burning brand from the kitchen stove. Jacob could hear movement in the barn, men positioning themselves, preparing for his arrival. Naomi, he said, turning to face her. If this goes wrong, it won't, she said firmly. I've seen how it ends now. Not clearly, but enough. You lived through this, Jacob. We all do. How can you be sure? She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, soft and quick and full of promise. Because I saw something else in my dreams. Something I didn't tell you. What? I saw us dancing at our wedding. In the sunflower field, after it grows back green and tall. I saw Mateo laughing, and I saw you smile the way you used to before the sadness. Her eyes blazed with certainty. That future is still possible, but only if we fight for it. The first flames began to lick at the edge of the sunflower field, orange tongues of light in the gathering darkness. Jacob heard shouts from the barn, confusion and alarm as Thornfield's men realized something was wrong. Go, Jacob said. Get my boy. Naomi nodded and slipped away into the shadows, moving with surprising grace toward the root cellar. Jacob watched her go, this woman who'd walked out of dreams and into his life, then turned his attention to the barn. The sunflowers were catching now, the fire spreading with hungry speed. Thick smoke began to pour across the yard, and Jacob could hear coughing from inside the barn. Time to move. He stepped into the open, his colt ready, and walked toward the barn like a man strolling to Sunday service. The smoke swirled around him, making him a ghost in the firelight. Thornfield, he called out. You wanted me? Here I am. The barn doors exploded open, and men came pouring out, coughing, cursing, eyes streaming from the smoke. Jacob counted 5, just as Naomi had said. But where was the 6th? His question was answered by the click of a gun hammer behind his ear. "Drop it, Everett," a young voice said, shaking with nerves. "I don't want to shoot you, but I will." Jacob smiled into the smoke and flame. "Son," he said conversationally, "that's the second biggest mistake you'll ever make." "What's the first?" "Forgetting that my boy can see the future." And he told his new mama exactly where you'd be standing. The shot came from Jacob's left, not from the nervous boy behind him. Naomi's rifle cracking like thunder through the smoke-filled air. The young gunman's weapon went spinning from his hand as he cried out, clutching his wrist. Jacob spun and caught the boy's collar, pulling him close. "Smart choice, son," he said, then pushed him toward the house. "Now run, and don't look back." The kid didn't need to be told twice. He disappeared into the smoke, leaving Jacob to face the remaining 4 men who'd emerged from the barn. Through the swirling haze, he could see Thornfield's tall frame, a rifle in his hands and murder in his eyes. "You think you're clever, Everett?" Thornfield's voice cut through the crackling of flames. "Burning your own land to smoke us out." "Sunflowers grow back," Jacob replied, his Colt tracking movement in the smoke. "Men don't." A muzzle flash lit up the haze to his right, and Jacob dove behind the water trough as splinters exploded from the fence post where he'd been standing. The fire had spread beyond the sunflower field now, catching the dry grass and sending smoke billowing across the entire ranch yard like a living thing. "Papa!" Mateo's voice cut through the chaos, and Jacob's heart leaped to see his son emerging from the root cellar with Naomi close behind. The boy was dirty and scared but whole, and that was all that mattered. "Stay down," Jacob shouted. But even as he spoke, he saw Thornfield raising his rifle toward the pair. Time slowed to a crawl as Jacob rose from behind the trough, his Colt coming up smooth and fast. .2 shots echoed as one. Thornfield's bullet whined past Naomi's ear, close enough to stir her hair. Jacob's found its mark, spinning the man around and dropping him to his knees in the dirt. "Boss," one of Thornfield's men shouted, but their leader waved him off with a bloody hand. Still got fight in me," Thornfield gasped, struggling to rise. "This ain't over, Everett. There's more coming. More who want what you got." "Let them come," Jacob said, stepping out of the smoke like an avenging angel. "I've got something to fight for now." Quinn appeared from the far side of the barn, herding the remaining gunmen at gunpoint. "These 3 are done fighting, Mr. Everett. Seem to have lost their taste for violence." Jacob looked at the defeated men, hired guns who'd expected an easy payday and found themselves outmaneuvered by a rancher, a college girl, and a boy who could see tomorrow. "Load Thornfield in a wagon and take him to the sheriff. Tell him what happened here. And if he asks questions," one of the men ventured. "Tell him the truth," Jacob said simply. Marcus Thornfield came to steal a man's land and learned that some things are worth more than water rights. As the defeated gunmen gathered their wounded leader and prepared to leave, Jacob felt small arms wrap around his waist. Mateo pressed, his face against his father's shirt, and Jacob could feel the boy shaking. "I'm sorry, Papa," Mateo whispered. "I tried to be brave like you taught me, but I was scared." Jacob knelt down and gathered his son into his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of boy and summer dust. "You were brave, son. Braver than any grown man had a right to expect." "I saw her coming," Mateo said, glancing toward Naomi with wonder. "In his eyes. In my dreams. The lady with the storm cloud eyes who was going to help us. But I didn't know she was going to be what?" Jacob asked gently. "My new mama." The words hung in the air like a prayer or a promise. Jacob looked up to find Naomi watching them, her face soft with emotion. The smoke was clearing now, revealing the full extent of the fire's damage. The sunflower field was gone, reduced to ash and stubble. Part of the barn's roof had caught, but Quinn was already organizing a bucket brigade to douse the flames. "Naomi," Jacob said, rising to his feet but keeping one hand on Mateo's shoulder. "I know this is all happening fast, and I know you've got a life waiting for you back east." "Had a life," she corrected, stepping closer. "I had a life that was all books and lectures and proper tea parties. But I've never felt more alive than I do right now, standing in the ashes of a sunflower field with dirt on my dress and smoke in my hair. Even knowing what you know, about the danger, about the hard times ahead." Naomi's smile was brighter than the dying flames. "Especially knowing that." Jacob, I didn't just see our wedding in my dreams. I saw years of them. Christmas mornings with Mateo opening presents by the fireplace. Summer evenings on the porch, watching him grow into the fine man he's going to become. I saw gray in your hair and lines around my eyes, and I saw us still dancing in fields of sunflowers. Jacob felt something break loose in his chest, a knot of grief and loneliness he'd carried for 3 years. Are you sure? Because once you say yes, there's no going back to that other life. I'm sure, she said, and stepped into his arms like she'd been doing it all her life. Besides, someone needs to keep you and Mateo out of trouble. And according to my dreams, you're both going to need a lot of supervision. Mateo giggled, the sound like music after the violence and fear. She's right, Papa. I saw it too. She's going to make you eat vegetables and take baths, both of which you need, Naomi said solemnly, then broke into laughter that was pure joy. Jacob kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, while the smoke cleared and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. When they broke apart, he saw Quinn watching them with a grin that split his young face. So what now, boss? Quinn asked. We rebuild. We rebuild, Jacob confirmed. But first, we need to get word to the territorial governor about what happened here. If Thornfield was right about others coming for the water, we need to be ready. I can help with that, Naomi said. I still have connections in Denver. People who can make sure the right authorities know what's happening out here. And I can help with the rebuilding, Quinn added. I know men who'll work for fair wages and stand up to bullies. Good men who deserve a chance. Jacob looked around at his ranch, damaged but not destroyed, changed but not broken. The sunflowers were gone, but the earth remained. Come spring, he'd plant them again. Come spring, everything would be green and growing. There's one more thing, he said, reaching into his shirt pocket. He pulled out the impossible deed, the one dated 3 months in the future. Naomi, in your dreams, did you ever see what happened to this? She took the paper and held it up to the firelight. As they watched, the ink began to fade, the words dissolving like smoke until only blank parchment remained. The future changed, she said softly. We changed it. Together, Jacob added. Together, she agreed. 6 months later, Jacob stood in a field of young sunflowers, their faces turned toward the morning sun like an army of hope. Naomi moved among them in her white dress, gathering blooms for the tables, while Mateo chased butterflies with the single-minded determination of a boy who'd learned that tomorrow could be better than today. The water rights battle had been won through lawyers and legislation rather than bullets. The territorial governor had been very interested in Marcus Thornfield's activities and very grateful to the rancher who'd helped expose them. The Lazy E was safe, its spring protected by law and defended by neighbors who'd learned to stand together. You ready for this? Quinn asked, adjusting his new vest. He'd stayed on as foreman, proving himself as steady and reliable as summer rain. Ready as a man can be, Jacob replied, though his hands shook slightly as he straightened his string tie. The preacher from town was waiting by the old oak tree, his Bible open to the passage about love bearing all things. Friends and neighbors had gathered, some who'd known Jacob since childhood, others who'd heard the story and wanted to witness the wedding of the man who'd fought the future and won. Naomi walked toward him through the sunflowers, beautiful as sunrise, her storm cloud eyes bright with joy. Mateo walked beside her, carrying the rings on a small pillow, his chest puffed with pride at his important role. Dearly beloved, the preacher began, but Jacob barely heard the words. He was too busy memorizing this moment. The way the light caught in Naomi's hair, the sound of bees humming in the flowers, the feel of his son's hand in his as they stood together at the beginning of their new life. When the preacher asked if he would take this woman to be his wife, Jacob's voice rang out clear and strong. I do. And when Naomi spoke the same words, her voice carried across the field like a promise of all the tomorrows they would share. The kiss that sealed their union tasted like sunflower honey and second chances as the sun set on their wedding day. Jacob and Naomi danced in the field where they'd first fought for their future, while fireflies began to wink in the gathering dusk. Mateo sat on Quinn's shoulders, clapping in time to the fiddle music, his laughter mixing with the evening breeze. No more dreams about the future? Jacob asked as they swayed together. No more dreams, Naomi confirmed. Just this. Just now. Just us. Good, Jacob said, spinning her around until her skirt flared like a flower. Because I want to be surprised by what comes next. And in the field of sunflowers, under a sky full of stars, they danced toward tomorrow with hope in their hearts and love in their hands. Well, partners, that's the tale of how Jacob Everett found his future in the eyes of a stranger, and how love can change the course of destiny itself. If this story warmed your heart like a campfire on a cold night, be sure to give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. And speaking of sharing, tell us where you're watching from today. Whether you're in the dusty plains of Texas or the green hills of Ireland, we'd love to hear from you, fellow travelers on this journey called life.